Okay, here we are back again. It is Saturday, and it is a high time. Well, it's 4:20. I didn't even go for that high time pun, but it is time to talk about the Mothman. And we're doing the A to Z challenge where we're talking about a different paranormal topic each day. A to Z, we're up to M, meaning at the end of this video, we'll be halfway through the alphabet, and I can't believe it's only halfway. I'm having a lot of fun doing it, but wow, 13 more installments yet to come. But we are going to talk about the Mothman, which is it's one of the most famous and intriguing cases. And I'm not going to really go into the Chicago sightings recently. I will talk about that right off the bat just to get it out of the way. And even that's a little bit of a pun right off the bat. Essentially, the Chicago Mothman has been debunked over and over and over again. And I'm not going to be able to add anything new to it, except for the fact that people continue to talk about it. So it's still getting out there, even though it has been conclusively determined to be a publicity stunt by a website that I'm not going to say the name of because I'm not going to throw publicity their way. But it's been debunked over and over again by really amazing researchers like Sam Moranto and Alison Jornlin, who have looked into each and every single case and determined with amazing detail what was inaccurate about each reporting. And the thing that's really fascinating is being able to trace back using digital forensics, if you will, that different reports were coming from the same IP address, meaning that the same person or somebody living at least in the same building was reporting different things, which just reeks of suspicion, plus going to locations. This is kind of a lot was learned, I feel, personally. When you're going out to validate a paranormal claim, usually you're going out to try to see if, hey, can I see the same thing that the report says that somebody else saw? And of course, we go out a lot trying to debunk it. Like maybe it's, maybe this is what they saw, but then look at what's in the environment and let's see if the basics of the report even stand up to the slightest amount of scrutiny when you consider certain things like a person saying that they saw the Mothman up in the air, silhouetted by the moon, very much a la Tim Burton's Batman. And then you find out that, okay, on the date that was reported, it rained all night long. So the moon was not visible. So right off the bat, we have something that's inaccurate, something that just, it proves that it's a false report. And one that Alison Jornlin, who is with MilwaukeeGhosts.com, and definitely somebody that you should follow if you're into all things Hawaiian. Also, when it comes to Hawaiian ghost stories, she is behind the Hawaii Paracon, but also does tours of haunted downtown Milwaukee in the I think it's the third ward, kind of the unscrupulous dark past of Milwaukee. But she talks about seeing a report saying that it perched itself on top of a 5-story building, something like that. And in this area, there are no buildings over 3 stories. That it sat on top of a basketball hoop at this local park. They went to the park. There's no basketball hoops there. So very obvious, basic things that prove that indeed the Chicago Mothman is a publicity stunt for a local, for a website. So therefore, moving forward, so many people probably are aware of the Mothman, as I was, thanks to the movie that came out in 2002 with Richard Gere. Still one of my favorite horror movies, suspenseful, creepy, mysterious. I love it. And I did I'm not really also going to get into the fact versus fiction of that movie because it's already covered very well at A Ghost Hunter Watches, which you can see the link in the description of this video. You can click over there to watch the Mothman, the analysis of the Mothman Prophecies movie, comparing it to what the real story was. But I'm going to get in really quickly to the meat and potatoes. First off, we really think about the Mothman, especially nowadays. Like all you hear about when you hear about these sightings, they're sightings of the Mothman. But when you look back to historically what was happening in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the late 1960s, the Mothman, this bizarre cryptid sighting, was such a small part of the overall Mothman experience. It started with lights in the sky. It started with UFO encounters. And sometimes really dramatic ones where people were seeing a craft land and beings walk around and communicate telepathically with them. People on the ground could look up and see the UFOs, and their eyes would be like stinging and red and pink, like radiation exposure the next day, even though they were just looking at this thing at night. And even sometimes feeling communication come to them while they're looking at these crafts up in the sky. And this is something that isn't really touched on a lot. But so the Mothman, we think of it as a cryptid, but really there was so much more going on, and most of it was UFO and alien related. And when it comes to what was going on in Point Pleasant, it also was very, very big, had to do with the Men in Black. People that were coming in, people that were obviously from out of town, because this is a small town where everybody knows each other, looking not like locals, interviewing people, asking bizarre, odd questions. And they were around for a long time. And I know it's kind of, it's a really, really creepy case. And I do urge you all, especially if you've seen the movie, to check out the link below, because it really gets into detail about what was going on, and again, comparing it to the movie. But let's talk about the sightings. The first sighting took place in the old TNT plant. Back in the World War II era, there was an area just outside of town that they built this huge factory to manufacture TNT, dynamite, black powder explosive. And by the 60s, it was out of business. The war effort was well past, and there was just not need for it anymore. So it was just this big structure that was not even a big structure. There were some structures, but it was really a big area that was now just kind of empty, and the land was being retaken by nature. And so naturally, it's a good place to sneak off to if a guy and his gal, high school age, wanted someplace quiet to go neck. It became kind of a lover's lane type of location. And that is when the first Mothman encounter happened. And that is depicted very accurately and similarly in the movie. So there were a handful of Mothman sightings, mostly focused around the TNT area and the old factory building, which is now just this old shell of a building that was still standing but falling apart. It became nicknamed the Birdhouse, because this is usually where the Mothman was seen. Which we took a drive out there. It's maybe 20 minutes outside of town. It's kind of an oddly long drive, considering you're just not seeing very much. It was further away than I thought it was going to be, and I was very excited. I knew it was a place that was off limits, that you could not, it was private property, you couldn't go onto it. And we kind of found ourselves there. We were on a road trip, and we thought, well, if we swing down, we take a southern route back, we can go by Point Pleasant, which was definitely a bucket list place for me. And so, we didn't call ahead. We didn't coordinate anything, didn't arrange anything. And I thought, well, I can't legally be on this property, but we'll get as close to it as we can, and I'll fly my drone. And it's, hopefully we can see something through the canopy. There are still these domes that used to hold the explosives that people still go to and look around. And apparently it's a creepy place. I think people psych themselves out more than anything. There's no current ghost stories or hauntings or Mothman sightings, anything like that down there in Point Pleasant since the late 60s. But I thought it would be neat if I could just get some aerial view over it. And if you guys don't have a drone, I've got the DJI Phantom, which is a higher end one. And it takes a little while to warm up. So I turn it on, and as I'm assembling it, putting the propellers back on and all that. And as I was waiting for that to get ready to lift off, I started hearing gunfire coming from inside of the wooded area. I thought, oh gosh, somebody's in there hunting, and it's supposed to be a wildlife refuge. So that was not expected. And also, if I'm flying this thing overhead, it's just going to look too inviting to shoot at. Also, they don't know we're out here. We're on this gravel little road. Let's get the hell out of here before we catch a bullet on accident too. And we pack up and hightail it out of there. So that was disappointing. That was the one area of the whole Mothman experience down there in Point Pleasant that I wasn't able to check out. I would love to go back one day, because during the Mothman Festival, which is once a year, they actually do guided tours of the TNT area. And that's still a place that I would love to return to. And in general, this whole area is magnificent. It is just a treasure trove of history. Let's move forward a little bit in the Mothman story. We see in the movie a lot that, Richard Gere and other people around town began to get phone calls from this bizarre creature, this bizarre being called Ingrid Cold. And that's true. That happens. There's these warnings that are given, these bizarre cryptic conversations. But really, there's a second one that I think his name went by Apple or something like that. But basically, I think what is going on, at least as John Keel is the person that wrote the book. I don't think I've said his name yet, and I really oughta, because he is the main investigator. He was around here this entire time. He was tipped off to say, hey, there's weird stuff going on in Point Pleasant. Why don't you come on down and observe it for yourself and maybe write about it? So he was there from the very beginning, from maybe, and I think the Mothman sightings had started, but the UFO sightings were still going on. So he was able to witness that as well. I don't think he ever saw the Mothman himself, but the thing is, the Mothman was not really seen all that much. There were a handful of sightings, but the bigger thing were these visitors that were now hanging out in town. So you wonder, what is a man in black? I guess M could be for man in black in this instance. That would be actually maybe a better one, because we could talk about all sorts of things. But, a lot of times we think that they're probably government, CIA people on the inside that are trying to erase memories, just like Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. But maybe there's something else. Maybe there are these alien travelers as well. Are they interdimensional? Are they interplanetary? Who knows? But so these phone calls are happening all over town with odd warnings and sometimes repetitive conversations with the same people. And Ingrid Cold is not actually a very big player compared to the movie. I think he just had the coolest weird name. But what we end up learning is that they have a big problem understanding time as we know it. And so they're not on our wavelength at all. And it's the concept of time is a totally foreign concept to them, which that's, I think, what makes me think of interdimensional, something outside of this universe and outside of this reality as we know it, which is really fascinating. And a big thing that's important is, okay, so we call Mothman prophecies. People have seen this flying cryptid thing and it gives prophecies, or these other people are giving prophecies. In real life, those prophecies were not very accurate. They were oddly, they were on target, but off also. In the movie, they're very specific that, hey, this tragedy is going to happen on this day. There's going to be a tragedy on the river, or this plane from Denver is going to crash, and this is the fatality count. But in real life, the prophecies were just off a little bit. Like, they predicted that the Pope, there would be an assassination attempt on his life, and that he would be stabbed in this area and he would die. Everything happened except the Pope lived. So that was not, there's too much right to ignore it entirely. And an interesting part of the book that would have been interesting to see in the movie was that there was information about the upcoming assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. It had the wrong date, had the right year and the right day of the month, but the wrong month itself. And John Keel apparently placed some phone calls trying to get a warning out there, but he was never taken seriously. And of course, we see what happened. So, why I was starting to gush about the location of Point Pleasant was, and I guess I shouldn't just forget the main prophecy, what the linchpin is of this whole, the movie and the book. It has to do with the Silver Bridge disaster. And it really did unfold just like you do see in the movie. There's a traffic light on the fritz. There's a weakness in the bridge, and the bridge was made in the 1920s. It was meant to hold much lighter cars, and it just couldn't handle it. And there were residents that had the premonition dreams as well, just like we see in the movie where there's a headlight. So there's more cryptic than that. It was just Christmas presents floating in the river and lights coming up from underneath. And then we see in the end, this did happen right before Christmas. There were Christmas presents floating in the river and illuminated from headlights of cars that had sunk because the bridge was completely packed full of cars due to some faulty traffic lights. And then the bridge collapsed. What was it? 40 or 35 or so perished on this one day. Oh, no, I think it was 45, somewhere around there. So, big loss of life, especially for this small town. And it was a major disaster. And it was oddly falsely predicted by these interdimensional or whatever travelers that they said that there was going to be a massive power outage that took out the entire eastern seaboard, and there would be just chaos and who knows what kind of looting and rioting and all that kind of stuff. But and this time they picked the exact day and time, completely accurate, but obviously what exactly it was that happened was very off. It was that's when the bridge collapse happened. Um, it's interesting what else has happened in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It was the site of the first battle of the American Revolutionary War, and that first battle took place right next to where the modern day Mothman Museum is. And moving forward in time as well, when there's these conflicts between the white settlers and the Native Americans that were there first, there was an important chief that went by Chief Cornstalk that he was taken prisoner one day. There were all sorts of little scuffles going on, and he died in captivity. And where he was buried was on land that was kind of used as, I think, a fort at that time. And now that is right where the Silver Bridge, the original Silver Bridge, met up with the land just on the other side of the river, on the West Virginia side of the river. And it's just kind of amazing that so much history is tied to this one little town, this tiny little town, and so much dark history. So, yeah, I'm dying to go back to West Virginia, back to Point Pleasant, West Virginia specifically. We had a great time there. I don't know if you guys have ever been, let me know. If you guys know of any haunted locations in Point Pleasant or just on the other side of the river, on the Ohio side, definitely let me know. It is visiting the Mothman Museum, and the site is just a fascinating and heavy place because you do know so much loss of life happened right there with that bridge collapse. The bridge was rebuilt downriver quite a ways, so you can go to where the bridge used to stand, where there used to be a road, and now it's just a really nice riverfront park actually. But yeah, that's a little bit about the Mothman. I will be back tomorrow. Well, maybe tomorrow. It's Easter, so we'll see if I make it tomorrow or if I do it on Monday. But I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite, really creepy phenomena. Comes out of Hawaii. Comes out of, I was going to say Oahu, but I think all of the islands report this, and it's the really, really bizarre and unusual and super creepy and allegedly homicidal legend of the Night Marchers. Check out whatsyourghoststory.com to share your own stories, and follow us on all social media, including Instagram and Facebook. So that'd be facebook.com/whatsyourghoststory. We are a community all about sharing our own stories and sharing information. So please join us and join that party.